Welcome to Little Detours with Regina Brett, where we help you create a life you love out of the life you have. Thanks for joining me. I'm your host, Regina Brett. Mansfield Frazier has been called a lot of things in life: a shining light and a street hustler, a big-time counterfeiter and a retired outlaw, a winery owner and a community activist. He's also a powerful author and columnist who uses his voice to transform the lives of others, to lift people out of financial poverty and that poverty of spirit that keeps people in bondage long after they're released from prison. Mansfield's life took a series of detours which led him in and out of prison, where he wrote the book From Behind the Wall. Mansfield Frazier is a native Clevelander and executive director of Neighborhood Solutions, a nonprofit whose mission is to improve the quality of life for residents of Ward 7, where he lives with his wife, Brenda. He's the general manager of Chateau Huff, a vineyard and winery owned by the nonprofit that trains and employs formerly incarcerated individuals. He's here to talk about second chances and how to give one to yourself. Mansfield, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Regina. Thanks for thinking of me.
Oh, you've always been such, to me, a force of change, and there's just a joy about you that I wonder how you preserve after all you've been through.
Well, life throws you a lot of curves, and I think you have to. That kind of thing is foundational. I had a strong foundation that allowed me to weather whatever storms, because most of the negative stuff that I got involved with, I did it out of choice. It wasn't out of necessity. I always had options. I was just very angry with society, why I went down that dark path for a number of years. But I had two wonderful parents that gave me confidence that I could do things. And so most of the things in life, and I guess the main thing is I'm not afraid to fail. And going to prison is a failure, but running a business, a lot of people, I talk to a lot of young people, they want to go into some kind of business, but they're afraid of failing. And my answer is, don't be afraid of failing, because you're going to do it. Get used to failing, because everybody does. It's part of the state, that fear of failing. So I dust myself off and figure myself up and get battle.
I'm going to pause for just a second. So Mansfield, you said you're not afraid to fail because you're going to do it. When did you learn that lesson?
Oh, I think I was taught that lesson by my parents. That I tell people I was very fortunate. I was kind of born and bred to be a success. My father ran a small business. We lived upstairs over it. I saw him being successful my whole life. Him and my mother were great role models. So I never, it's funny that as a kid, it was a beer tavern in the inner city. So there were some drunks hanging around. And for a while, until I was got to kindergarten, I thought everybody grew up to be a drunk for some reason. Not looking at my parents, but once I got over that, it was, I just knew I'd look around me at what other people were doing and say, hey, I can do that. They're both very bright people, and they gave me some good genes, and I just look at what other people are doing, and I still have that. So, well, when I started the vineyard, I can learn that.
Now, let me go back to high school. You had pretty much things going pretty well. You were going to go to Ohio State. You had a full ride, and then your life took like a Bruce Springsteen song turn. The girlfriend gets pregnant, and you get married at 17?
At 17, because my father was a deacon in church, my mother attended church, and that religious part, because the woman, the girl that I married, I was 17, she was 17 going on 40, but yeah. But my father said, well, you're going to get married. And it's funny because this is in 61, and it was almost like a punishment. Yeah, you got the girl pregnant, you're going to marry her. So it was almost like a punishment. And I didn't have the will or heart to say, no, I'm going to go away to college. And I remember standing there at the altar of my mother's church, shaking. I was so I was so afraid. And but one of the things he knew that I would be, I was eminently equipped to leave the nest when I graduated at 18, got a job, and raise a family. There was never any question about, can I do this? I knew I could. So did they. They knew I could be. They'd raised me to be successful. So we had a very financially very successful relationship with other stuff that wasn't so successful. But
so you get out of East Tech High School in '61, and then you end up into a foundry, aluminum foundry. And
yeah, Alcoa. The first job I got was at Alcoa Aluminum, and this was like, there's an old story that back in the 50s and the early 60s, you could quit a job in the morning and walk across the street and get another one that afternoon. And yeah, jobs were that plentiful. And the foundry was hard, dirty work. And I got a job there because a friend of mine across the street, he said, let's go down there and apply. And they hired us on the spot. But the problem was, they get busy and they hire you, but then they lay you off a lot. There's a lot of, until you gain seniority, you get laid off a lot. So I was laid off for about a week, and I ran into the same guidance counselor who'd gotten me the full ride to Ohio State. I was picking my wife up from night school, and she became an RN, operating room RN. And he told me to go apply at the illuminating company. And I said, well, you're crazy. Illuminating company don't hire Black people. He just told me, go apply. And so I listened to him, and I did. And I got hired. I didn't know why I got hired, though.
What do you mean by that?
Well, during the, when John F. Kennedy got elected president, his brother Robert was the attorney general. They picked an industry that they thought should integrate. And their logic was, everybody uses public utilities. So that's who we're going to go after first. And they didn't ever make an announcement. They quietly talked to public utility company and said, you're going to do it nicely or we're going to sue you. And because places like the illuminating company, the gas company, those were lifetime jobs. And the fact was, they were like double prejudiced. By that, I mean, they didn't hire Blacks except for some scut job, some dirty job, but they didn't hire whites unless you had a family member. They always hired the sons, daughters, nephews. If you didn't have that kind of family connection, it was very, very hard to get into a public utility job. And so the Kennedys caused that to break up. And I never knew what caused it until years later.
So Mansfield, you ended up at the illuminating company, Cleveland Electric Illuminating, for about 10 years. And what was it like?
9 months, 11 days.
Oh, there you go. What was it like for you being probably one of the few Black people that was really kind of ready to rise to some power in there?
Well, it was interesting. It was very interesting. I went to work at a shop that there was one Black guy, and he'd been there forever. He was like a help. He swept up and held a piece of wood when the carpenter was cutting. He was nearing retirement, and there was like 42 guys. And so I was the young guy that could have a future. And what it was, they had hired, most of the guys they'd hired out of World War II. So by the 60s, a lot of guys were getting their retirement age. So one of the top jobs as a certified pipe welder opened up. Normally you work your way up as a helper, grade B, grade A, then you become a skilled craftsman. I went from helper to skilled craftsman because the opportunity was there, and none of the other guys wanted it because it was pipe welding, certified pressure pipe welding. You see the steam rising up downtown Cleveland out of those steam holes. That means there's a leak in the pipe somewhere. And my job was to go down there and weld and fix it. And it's hot and it's dirty. It's very precise, can be a little bit dangerous. And so they didn't have any choice. I guess I was the only option. And I was very, very good at it. I was excellent at it because I was young, I was eager. And one of my boasts was I was the youngest man ever to certify on pressure pipe in the state of Ohio. I was 19. And I was the first Black. And the pay was excellent. because you worked a lot of overtime, because you can't shut the steam off during the day because people are freezing in the wintertime. So you have to work weekends and nights to fix the pipes. And I went along well, but until they started using me to train other new Black employees. What had happened was that they were getting pressure from the government. You're not hiring enough Blacks. So they started holding classes. They would hire in 25 Black guys, pay to train them to learn how to read rulers, do basic math, the skills they would need, how to use hand tools. Then they would hire them. And they would hire 25 guys. At the end of the 6-week period, they might have 2 or 3 left. And so they finally turned to me and asked if I could help. And I told them, well, I can't help as long as you got that scab, because it was a non-union guy they brought in to do the work. And I was a union man by then. So eventually, after about a couple of more failures, they asked me to assist with that program. And I got 24 out of the 25 guys through the program. So they thought I was a genius, but I wasn't.
So what caused you to leave that job?
They were having me train people to promote past me. I'll take a white guy, show him stuff to do, then they promote him but wouldn't promote me. And I say, hey, wait a minute. I trained him. I know more than he does. And they said, well, yeah, you're the sharpest guy we got. And they used to use me as a supervisor when the supervisor went on vacation. They said, but we can't put you in charge over white guys. So we can't do that. This was in '67. And it was literally soul crushing to me, because remember I said I had, the one thing my father had not prepared me for was the racism I would meet and encounter outside of the cocoon that he created. In my neighborhood, I was like the prince of the city, because you have to understand, when you're on a tavern right in the middle of the roughest part of the Black neighborhood, I thought my father was rich. And comparatively speaking, he was. He was the wealthiest man in the community. Everybody owed him money. I got new Swin bicycles that I used to have to learn how to fight to protect. We'd go to baseball games and have seats on third baseline. He'd take us hunting and fishing and on vacation down to the Kentucky Derby. So I had a charmed life. I was totally unprepared for racism. Now, when I hired in at the illuminating company, guys that I worked with, some of the white guys would throw little jabs at you, and I throw them right back. I actually liked that, because I was much quicker. I was so much quicker than they were. And they were like, I remember talking to my father, and father told me, he said, son, midgets are always going to be pulling at your pants cuffs, so don't worry about it. And so they didn't bother me, because they were just, and they soon learned to quit making the racial slurs and innuendos, because I would give it back so hard that they leave me alone. But when the company told me that they couldn't or wouldn't promote me, it set off an anger that my feeling was, you invited me and you hired me. I'm playing the game according to your rules. I'm playing fair. I had a perfect attendance. I got sick right after, about 2 weeks after I got there. I got tonsillitis and had to be off. Oh God, I hope they don't think I'm just, making this up. I never had another sick day in 9 years. I lived close by, so if it was a snowstorm, I could get there and open the shop up. I was what you would consider the perfect employee. And I felt, based off of that I should have been treated differently. And it was affecting me to the extent that my marriage was kind of falling apart anyway, because I got married much too young. But I was literally going from being a very happy guy to a very, very miserable guy, to the point, the only joy I had, Regina, would be in my basement, all in my .30-06 rifle, and seeing how fast could I work the boat. I had a rooftop picked out where literally I was going to go on the roof, and I wasn't going to just spray everybody. But there were certain guys, when they walked out, I was going to shoot them. But God sent an angel, and my life took another turn. Thank God I didn't. But I was that upset.
Well, when you talk about being soul crushing, it sounds like it really kind of broke something inside you. You're trying to build this life that everybody seems to want, and then you can't get any higher because you're black, and so you ended up taking a really sharp turn in your life.
Well,
People would
yeah.
say to a life of crime, but for you, it didn't seem so much a crime because the system wasn't made for you, wouldn't let you
Well,
in.
I said, oh, so this is how life in this world works. Y'all cheat, so I can cheat too. And that was my, and so I selected what I wanted to do. And I didn't start off counterfeiting credit cards, but I started off hanging around with, after my marriage fell, I was 27, headed toward 28, and I left town with a exotic dancer, and we traveled quite a bit, and we wound up in New York, and that's how I learned to counterfeit credit cards.
So you went from stealing them to making them.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And then this turned into, it was pretty lucrative until you got caught.
Well, it was very lucrative, but the thing is, Regina, if you're a professional criminal, career criminal, like I was at this time, it's like being a house painter, working off a ladder, or a roofer. There's a chance you're gonna fall. You try to, I mean, it's called occupational hazard, but I always planned for the eventuality. I never got caught. Somebody always told.
I like
Somebody
that
else would get caught and always tell. So, and you can't do it. You can do it by yourself to a degree, but you work with a crew, and somebody on the crew does something stupid. I learned a lot about human nature and how you can't change some people around and make them successful. And a lot of the crew was getting into too many drugs, which would cause problems.
So you made and spent millions, and you once explained, I think, to a classroom, you don't know what living is until you're spending someone else's millions. That must have felt like a big high.
Oh my God! The first time, I went into a jewelry store in Las Vegas and spent over $30,000 for a Rolex watch. That was like the biggest high in the world, the biggest kick in the world, because the guy that sold me the watch, he wasn't getting cheated. He got paid. I got the watch. It was 2 or 3 people down the line that the insurance company, Lloyd's of London, that's who insured that at the time. That's who was insuring most credit cards. So, yeah, to me, it was a victimless crime. Of course, it isn't. They're going to, but I always felt it was one bandit robbing another bandit. Credit card companies are brutal with that 25. The only people that charge 25% interest is the mafia and Visa. They're the only 2 people that get away with 25%. It's called vigorous when it gets to that level. That's what the mafia charge, quarter on the dollar.
Wow.
So I had no sympathy for the credit card company, none.
Well, Mansfield, we're already at the halfway mark, so I just want to pause and thank you for listening to Little Detours with Regina Brett and to our guest, Mansfield Frazier. I know you have many podcast choices to listen to, and I'm just grateful you chose mine. So, Mansfield, the first time you end up in prison, what is it like when that door closes behind you? I've heard somebody once say, the only day harder than the day when you go into prison is the day you get out. What is it like the day you go into prison the first time?
You're anxious because you never had the experience before. But once you survey the situation, and that anxiousness for me might have lasted 2 or 3 days. I dealt with these same guys in my neighborhood growing up. If I would have been born in Hunting Valley or Pepper Pike and was a white guy, then I'd have a real problem. But I fit right in. And what happened was, because the crime that I'm in prison for, there's a pecking order. If you go for stealing a loaf of bread, you're on the low end of the pecking order. If you go for stealing Rolex watches, you're on the high end of the pecking order. And so I love to read, so immediately I'm in the law library or the library, the book library and the law library. And once you help one guy write a motion that gets him a sentence reduction, and it's easy to do, a lot of them just functionally illiterate, they start treating you like you're F. Lee Bailey or somebody. So it was, after being there, it's very, very easy. A little too easy. What I'm saying was, after the first time, I used to tell, Secret Service is the guys that police credit cards because it's similar to money. Secret Service look out for counterfeit money and counterfeit credit cards. And I said, look, you can't rattle those keys and scare me anymore. You know that, right? You rattling those keys telling me, putting me back in prison like throwing Brer Rabbit back in the briar patch. I function very well. I ain't trying to stay, but I'm not afraid of it. It was an occupational hazard. And I knew I always knew I wasn't going to be there long. They would threaten you with 20 years. Yeah, get serious. I had a little trick that I played on them to keep my sentences short. See, they want you to tell on somebody. I'll never forget the first time I got busted here in Cleveland. They asked me, what do you know about George Forbes? I said, all I know is he's a city councilman. I never met George. I know him now, we're friends now. They wanted me to either tell on something or make something up about George Forbes because they didn't like him. I don't know anything about George Forbes. I said, but I'll tell you this, those credit cards I make with a machine. Now you lock me up, the machine is still out there and somebody else could be using it, making more credit cards. What you want, you really don't want me, you really want that machine. And I said, if you take that machine back to Washington and show your boss you got the equipment, you'll probably get a promotion. And it worked every time. But I always gave them old beat up equipment I had equipment all over the United States.
All right, so your last and longest sentence was 27 months in Ashland, Kentucky. And that's when you really started writing. You got into a prison writers group, you wrote essays, and you turned this into a book. Did you write the book actually while you were in prison?
Oh yeah, from the beginning. I wrote it on a bet, basically. I was a tutor. I was tutoring math and English. My math ain't that strong, but I could stay ahead of the guys I was tutoring anyway, but I was good with English. And there was another counterfeiter. He worked like once a year. He made Social Security checks, a guy out of Louisville, Kentucky. And we would be reading the papers, and federal prison, they have newspapers from all over the country because guys are from all over the country. And there was a writer, you probably know the name, William Raspberry. He was a
great writer.
Yeah, great writer. And he was writing about something about the inner city. And I said, Raspberry don't know what he's talking about. He ain't never lived in the inner city. And so this guy admits, what, you think you can do better? I said, yeah, I think I can. So that's what started. I started writing on the dare. And I always felt, I had tried writing before, a couple of years before. I had gotten me a little condo up in Lake Tahoe that was out of the way, had it furnished, it got me a little computer. And boy, I almost learned to be a writer. And as soon as somebody called me and said, hey, we got something going on down in Los Angeles or Miami or somewhere, I'm on a plane gone. So I couldn't discipline myself enough absent federal prison. If I had never went to prison, I never would be a writer because I was too undisciplined.
So your book ends up being published by Paragon House, New York Publishing, and it's like a big turning point. And tell us about this moment you had when you're getting ready to get out of prison and the prison psychologist comes up and says, well, you're in trouble now.
Yeah. When a staff member tells you, hey, you're in trouble now, what did I do? And, you don't want, that's the last thing a convict wants to hear, is that you're in trouble now. So he just kind of smiled and we said, you're a month short, meaning you got a month to go. You're a month short. I said, yeah. He said, you finally got published. I said, yeah. He said, and you're going to get out and start doing the exact same thing you did to get you here. And I laughed. I said, yeah, I'm a counterfeiter. That's what I do. I said, when you catch me, you can lock me up. And he looked at me and he said, oh, and make everything in your book a damn lie, huh? And just turned on his heels and walked away. And Regina, it hit me like a 2x4 in the back of the head. he knew exactly what he was doing. And I honestly, I was rooted to the spot. I could not walk. I couldn't move. It was like my ears were ringing. I was like, and for the next 3 days, 3 nights, I was walking into people and the walls. I couldn't sleep. And I was transitioning, having to get about who I was and who I was comfortable with. Because I was very comfortable as a counterfeiter. I'd mastered it. I wasn't afraid of prison. It was a great lifestyle. I had to give that up to become what I said I wanted to be. I always did want to be a writer. I was afraid. I was afraid I wouldn't be successful at it. But I knew this stuff. You follow me? And at 51, 52 years old, to make that kind of change when you're in the middle of the stream can be kind of difficult. So after 3 days, I said, okay, my challenge was, he said, since you're so damn smart, let's see you make a living and not break the law. And at that point, it's okay, I'm gonna make my living as a writer.
So what scared you the most? You know, in those 3 or 4 days of really arm wrestling kind of with life,
yeah.
What was the fear that really kind of grabbed you the most?
Fear of failing.
Failing.
Fear that nobody would want to read me, that the book was a fluke, that I knew about the subject matter for the book. And I was well read. I followed politics quite a bit. I just didn't know if I had enough general knowledge to be successful. And I also knew that I would probably have to go ask for a job again, something I hadn't done in close to over 25 years. That was the main thing. I wasn't into asking nobody for a job because I'd gotten burned that route once before.
What's interesting, Mansfield, it sounds like it took more courage to go right than all the counterfeiting and the wild roller coaster life that would scare most people, I think.
Yeah. Well, you know, you know, they say going to prison is on the trauma scale is right up there with death in the family and stuff like that. But but it's an acquired skill once you learn how to do it. But for me, the fear was asking for a job. Yeah. Because I know the last time I'd asked for a job, how I'd been treated, and I just didn't know. And I did know me. I knew that I would not and could not accept bad treatment. Whether it was in a writing environment or illuminating company, I was a welder. Any environment, I'm just not cut out. I'm going to treat people fairly, and I'm going to demand fair treatment in return. And so I was very fortunate because when I got home, there was a bail bondsman. He was like a mentor to me, old guy. He used to ride around town in a black Rolls Royce. And he wanted me to write a book about his adventures of his life, which was very interesting. So, you know, you have to have a job when you get out of prison to satisfy a parole officer. So he gave me a job in his office right on West 3rd, right across from the Justice Center. And I was writing this book about his life. And I was sending out my work, sending out my resume, sending out, which was, you know, it was kind of a dummy resume, but I do have a book. But I thought writing samples would open the door for me, as they should, if you're judging, you know, if you're an editor. And one guy, bless him, Larry Durston, he was at the little weekly, Jim Carney on. Remember Jim Carney? Mm-hmm. I think it might have been a monthly at the time. It was called the Downtown Tab. It was like The Scene. And I sent something to him, never knew who he was. He called me and said, hey, come on over and I can interview you. And I said, well, Larry, the problem is I'm not supposed to leave the office. I'm on parole. And I was living in the halfway house. And so he came over and interviewed me. And he asked what kind of business it was. And I told him about the bail bond business. And he said, that's kind of interesting. Most people don't know about what bail bondsmen do. A lot of people use it. So my first article was on the business that I was setting there. And I knew it forward and backwards. I knew a lot of tricks about the bail bond industry, you know, because I used to have to use bail bondsmen to get myself or other people out of jail. So I knew it for, in fact, at the time I was training guys to take the bail bond test. And so I wrote the first piece on bail, the bail bond business, and which kind of comes in handy now because, you know, they're trying to change the rules of bail bonds now because they're keeping people in jail that should be out. And the bail bond industry is the one that's fighting to keep them in because for them, they're an insurance business, actually. So he liked the first piece, and they hired me as an associate editor.
So you give yourself this second chance, and you also, through your book and your work in the community, you've really taught other people how to give people second chances. I remember reading your book. It was very powerful about how to kind of rebuild your life, and the whole idea of when you leave prison, you know, most people, if you're a convicted felon, it's like a brand you wear the rest of your life. Sometimes you can't vote. You know, on a job application.
That's not true. You can vote.
Well, you can now, but I mean that's.
Oh no, you always could in Ohio.
Oh, in Ohio, but there's some states where you could.
Different states like Florida, southern states, because it's used as a mechanism to stop blacks from voting. Yes,
exactly.
But so Ohio, you could.
So I wonder, Mansfield, the idea of second chances. What do you say to people out in that community that maybe, you know, have jobs but they're not ready to hire somebody that's been in prison? How do you convince them that you got to give people a second chance?
That's a tough one. Getting it, there's two sides to the coin. One, you have to get the person ready to take advantage of this chance, and that's the side that we work on. Then you have to convince the employer that it's worth their while. Well, what happens if when the economy is good and jobs are plentiful and workers are short, employers are more willing to take a chance. It's purely economics. It's not that I can convince somebody to take a chance on a formerly incarcerated person. If they've got a bunch of choices, they're not going to choose. And I'll give you an example. During the 2000 census, 20 years ago, I was on Jane Campbell had started a reentry committee, and I was serving on it. The law was from Washington that formerly incarcerated people could work during the census, because actually it was Bush who made Bush the who made the strongest second chance law that our country has. It was done under a Republican. But the Census Bureau didn't want to follow it. And we were calling congressmen, but when they could not find enough people to do the census, then they started hiring formerly incarcerated people. So it's a matter of economics. But then we tell people, you know, you got this X on your back, you know, people are going to be watching, so you have to do exceptional work. And I still, to this day, sometimes wonder, is a person reacting to me or reacting to the fact that I've got 5 felonies? And my wife is the one that really solved that for me. She said, what damn difference does it make? Get over it. You are who you are. And that's what she did. Actually, she got me over that because my wife had never had a speeding ticket in her life. Very middle class. And I told her everything about my past. And people were saying, you going to marry him? And she says, my life, and I'm going to make the choice. And that was the other part. I had made up my mind I wanted to be a writer. I wasn't going to break the law. But when she married me, I said, well, there's no way am I going to give people a chance to say, see, we told you not to marry him. I was never going to embarrass her. So there was no way was I ever going to break the law again. And then life was too good. We through dint of hard work and smart investing and stay at home at night because I'm happy.
Different life.
Turned out pretty well.
So we just have a couple minutes left, and I want to make sure we talk about Chateau Huff. Now, people outside of Cleveland don't know the Huff neighborhood, but in Cleveland, it's renowned for the riots in the 60s. And
we call it uprising, but
the uprising. Well, there you go. The white view versus, the white media versus probably.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was the civil rights movement, really.
Right.
And
Exactly.
you went back to that area, a tough area of Cleveland, and made it home. But you also built a business there, a winery, a vineyard in Huff. I mean, it almost is mind blowing.
Well, it's yeah. That's kind of the result. You get like we named it Chateau Huff, which is a political name. Uh, Here's what I mean. If I were to say Chateau Hunting Valley, people, oh, well, of course. If I were to say Chateau Westlake, well, naturally. You say Chateau Huff, people do a double take. And what what we're actually saying is that the land we occupy here in Huff is just as valuable to us as the folks in Hunting Valley, their land is to them. So we love our community. Michael White started a renaissance in Huff because the Huff is ideally located between downtown and University Circle. And in the 90s, what Blacks were getting over, this whole notion of integration, it's a failed notion. For the most part, housing integration does not work. And so Blacks said, well, wait a minute, why do we keep chasing whites for integration? They're clearly not interested in it. Why don't we build middle-class homes in our own community? And you increase your political clout. Now, I'm an integrationist at heart. I would love for a white person to want to build a home across the street from me. I'd help them do it. I know how to build homes. I work with builders. But I'm not going to spin my wheels chasing something that somebody else isn't. So that's why we chose the community of Huff. And we kind of backed into it. We started a nonprofit, Neighborhood Solutions, where we were training people on best practices to help people coming out of prison. I knew all the best practices, I'd lived them. And so we got contracts. My wife was a social worker by profession, and we were put on seminars and we were training people around the state on best practices. Well, you dry the pool up pretty quick. You got almost everybody trained pretty quick. And so instead of telling people how to do it, we wanted to show people how to do it. And an opportunity came they were giving out grants called Reimagining Cleveland. It was a federal program. And the tagline was Reimagine Cleveland as a green city on a blue lake. And there was this big ugly apartment building across the street from us that had just been torn down. And actually it was a fireman that gave me the idea, because the fire station is at the other end. I live on 66 in Huff, 66 in Chester, the fire station. And so the fireman used to joke with me because we have a nice, pretty nice, he said, the next lot, he said, what are you gonna do? Put a swimming pool in there or a vineyard? So actually the idea came from a fireman joking with me. I said, let's put in a vineyard. That'll get people's attention. We had no plans on to turn it into a winery.
That is
but
so powerful.
We thought the notion of a vineyard, because I lived in California and visited vineyards, would be unique, and it certainly is.
It certainly is. And you have 7 bold, crisp wines. People can find them at the website, chateauhuff.com, and I'll have a link to that on my website, reginabrett.com. Mansfield, I want to thank you for joining us today. The idea of reimagining your life, we just have a minute here. You had to do that. You had to reimagine your life, and you're doing that for other people. What's the best tip you can give people when they really are ready to create a new way of life and they want to take a new path? What's your best advice for them?
Learn to overcome your fears. And I touched on this earlier. Overcome the fear of failing. And you overcome that by acknowledging the fact, yeah, it's a good chance I'm going to fail. But resiliency is the strongest character. And when I was actually doing credit cards, part of it, I was studying to be an actor in New York. I was doing credit cards, but I was also training as a thespian. And people in show business will tell you, the one who can stand the most rejection is the one that wins. No, for real. When you're
That's a great quality. You're right.
Yeah, you're auditioning, you're going up there and getting on a bare stage and auditioning, laying your soul on the line, and rejection can be crushing. So you have to learn how to manage rejection. If you learn how to manage rejection and failure, then you're guaranteed to be a success.
Especially as a writer. Every writer can attest to that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Well, Mansfield, I want to thank you for joining us. What's the best way for people to connect with you? What's the best website to reach you at?
Oh, Chateau Huff, www.chateauhuff.com, or they can email me, mansfieldf@gmail.
Okay, great. And my biggest takeaway today is to fail. You know you're going to fail. Get in there, do it, and get back up.
Exactly. Don't let failure throw you. Don't let it make you fearful of it. Realize realize it's the other side of the coin of winning is failure. And sometimes it's going to land on heads, sometimes it's going to land on tails, but don't let it throw you.
That's beautiful. Mansfield, let me have you close to your with your answer to this question I ask all my guests. What's the best thing for you that you do for yourself every day to create a life you love out of the life you have?
Take care of God's green earth. There's something about communing with nature. The one thing God is not making any more of is dirt, not making any more planet. So even if it's a small plot of land, but find a little small plot of land and dig in the dirt, put something in the ground, take care of God's planet in some kind of way.
That's beautiful. Thanks again, Mansfield, for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Regina. It's been fun.